Good evening. I'm Jeff Bennett.
And I'm Amna Nawaz. On the NewsHour tonight, with Election Day fast approaching, Donald Trump tries to appeal to women voters while Kamala Harris courts disenchanted Republicans.
A former Justice Department official raises questions about whether developments in Donald Trump's election interference case could improperly influence the presidential race.
And Judy Woodruff visits the swing state of Nevada, where voters who changed parties in the last election cycle could hold the key to the White House.
These kind of independent swing voters break at the very end. And so how they break in 2024 is going to matter a great deal in determining who wins this election.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by
Consumer Cellular. This is Sam. How may I help you? This is a pocket dial. Well, somebody's pocket.
Thought I'd let you know that with Consumer Cellular,
You get nationwide coverage with no contract. That's kind of our thing.
have a nice day.
A successful business owner sells his company and restores his father's historic jazz club with his son. A Raymond James financial advisor gets to know you, your passions, and the way you bring people together. Life well planned.
The Charles F. Kettering Foundation, working to advance inclusive democracies. Learn more at kettering.org.
You know, as somebody coming out of college, it can be very nerve-wracking, not knowing what to expect, whether you'll like your job or not, whether you'll make friends, whether you'll fit in. And here, I feel like it's so welcoming and such an inclusive place to work. You just feel like you're valued.
the Judy and Peter Bloom Kovler Foundation, upholding freedom by strengthening democracies at home and abroad. The Walton Family Foundation, working for solutions to protect water during climate change so people and nature can thrive together. Supported by the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, committed to building a more just, verdant, and peaceful world. More information at macfound.org. And with the ongoing support of these institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. With just 20 days until Election Day, for both 2024 presidential candidates, the battle is on to find and reach the few remaining voters who can still be persuaded.
Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump held events today to try to broaden their appeal. Here's Lisa Desjardins.
Former President Donald Trump digging in at a Fox town hall, repeating that other Americans are the enemy and making a declaration unprecedented in modern times, that he would use the military to quash dissent.
It is the enemy from within, and they're very dangerous. They're Marxists and communists and fascists, and they're sick.
Trump, also on Fox, made these comments Sunday.
I think the bigger problem are the people from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. And I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military.
Those words, Vice President Harris has called unhinged.
Donald Trump is increasingly unstable, and as has been said by the people who have worked closely with him, even when he was president, he's unfit to be president of the United States.
This as Trump was aiming to reach across the gender gap. That Fox town hall was in front of an all-woman audience, where Trump faced questions on reproductive rights, claiming to be pro-IVF, despite Republicans recently blocking IVF legislation at the U.S. Capitol.
I'm the father of IVF.
On abortion, the man responsible for overturning Roe v. Wade said he now thinks some red states have gone too far with restrictions.
They're too tough, and those are going to be redone because already there's a movement in those states.
Mr. Trump faces a voting gender gap. Polls show men support the former president by 16 points, but women back his opponent by 14 points. For Vice President Kamala Harris today, the hunt for votes meant reaching across the aisle.
No matter your party, no matter who you voted for last time, There is a place for you in this campaign.
In Pennsylvania, a nearly must-win for her, Harris appeared with nearly 100 Republicans who disavowed Donald Trump. Her message was for conservatives and others unhappy with the former president.
The coalition we have built has room for everyone who is ready to turn the page on the chaos and instability of Donald Trump.
With it came broader symbolism. The event was near the site where George Washington famously crossed the Delaware River during the Revolutionary War, a president who urged voters to choose country over politics.
To compose the Constitution of the United States, that work was not easy. The founders often disagreed, often quite passionately. But in the end, the Constitution of the United States laid out the foundations of our democracy. And now, the baton is in our hands.
The vice president's courtship of those outside her party continues tonight when she sits down for an interview with Bret Baier, her first interview on Fox News.
How are you, man? Pleasure meeting you. Yeah, good to meet you.
Just like Harris, today, Republican VP candidate J.D. Vance also stopped in Pennsylvania. The swing state will see all 4 candidates this week. As he campaigned for 2024, Vance was asked about 2020 and why he has not admitted that Trump lost. He gave a new response, fueling the lie that Trump won.
I think there are serious problems in 2020. So did Donald Trump lose the election? Not by the words that I would use, okay?
And in another critical state, Georgia, the first day of early voting on Tuesday shattered records there, with over 300,000 ballots cast. State election officials say they expect another potential record today. In polling places, the enthusiasm was palpable.
I think this is probably the most important voting season of our lifetime. I think it was imperative that every single person vote to help save democracy.
I think this is an existential election. It's going to have implications for my children and my 3 grandsons and more to come.
Also in Georgia, 2 court rulings yesterday blocked efforts by Republican officials to change the rules in the state. One ruling barred election officials from refusing to certify the results, and another said no to making the state count the final ballots by hand. Pivotal decisions in a pivotal race. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Lisa Desjardins.
We're now joined by longtime Democratic strategist James Carville. He served as a lead advisor on Bill Clinton's presidential campaign, and he's the subject of a new documentary called Carville, Winning is Everything, Stupid, which chronicles his efforts to get President Biden to step down from the top of the Democratic ticket. James Carville, welcome back to the NewsHour.
Well, thank you. Always a privilege to be on the show. I'm a big fan, been a fan of it for a long time.
Thank you, sir. Well, let me just start by getting your take on the state of the race. There's a new NPR analysis out today in the 7 battleground states. It looks now like Mr. Trump has his first lead in the polling average in those specific battleground states since Harris moved to the top of the ticket. It's a microscopic lead, less than half a percentage point. But I just wonder what you make of that.
You know, everybody says this, but it's actually true. In every election but one in this century, both candidates have gone to bed thinking they have a chance to win the election, 2008 being the only kind of exception to that. And there's just the polling is tight, but what generally happens is that election breaks one way or another toward the end. And so we'll wait and see. I have no prediction or anything like that. I'm just trying to work as hard as I can, but everything indicates that there's tight polling everywhere.
Well, with 20 days left, what do you think it would take to break one way or the next? There's no sort of big events left on the calendar, right?
Well, I think that, to be honest, I think that Vice President, her campaign is getting sharper, getting more visible. And frankly, he's getting, if anything, less attached to reality, even for him, than I've seen before. I mean, some of the stuff that he's out there saying is really wild. And then you had that weird rally, 39-minute, I don't know what you call it, but there's some, I think he's suffering from what I call dementia, madness and dementia at the same time. There's considerable evidence that he's in pretty severe state of deterioration right now. And we'll just have to keep monitoring. And I think she's doing a little better. I really do.
I want to ask you about one piece of advice you offered specifically to the Harris campaign in an op-ed last month. You wrote this: to be the certified fresh candidate, Ms. Harris must clearly and decisively break from Mr. Biden on a set of policy priorities she believes would define her presidency. In your view, has she done that enough?
Well, she has an 81-page economic plan that she's looking forward. Like many other people, she was asked a question at town hall. She pointed to all the plan and the things that she's going to do. The truth of the matter is, President Biden has been a somewhat different president. President Obama was. We've been a somewhat different president. President Clinton was. But she has her own ideas. They're articulated. They're in a plan, and I think she can talk about that more and more. I do, absolutely.
And she's adopted a somewhat unconventional media strategy, which you just sort of referenced there, too. She's been going on podcasts like Call Her Daddy to directly reach millions of women, on Fox to directly speak to Republicans. There's reports she could go on Joe Rogan's show now. She's done Howard Stern. Are these sort of high-risk, potentially high-reward scenarios for her?
Well, I'm not worried about her anymore. She's gotten a lot better. She's performed at the convention. She's performed during a debate. She's been on any number of different media platforms, and she's performed well. I think what they're trying to do is get her in front of as many people as they possibly can. And the strategy that they decided on is that we're going to do a lot of interviews, and that's fine. And I've seen a lot more visibility from her than I'd seen between the debate and this past weekend. So I'm very encouraged that she's out. She's doing a lot of different kind of forums to talk to different kinds of people, and I think that's a good idea. And she's doing it quite well, frankly.
James, as you've seen, that the gender gap in this race is one of the defining features of this campaign cycle. You've got Harris with a 14-point lead among women, Trump with a 16-point lead among men. And we've seen that Harris's support with young men in particular has been sliding. What's your view on that? Why do you think so many men have trouble supporting her?
Well, let's just back up a second. What she's really doing well is with white college-educated men. I think that's a key demographic for her. It is true that she's not doing quite as well with young non-white males as we did in 2020, but she's doing better in other male demographics, and I think she's going to have to improve on that. Absolutely. And I've been very outspoken about the Democrats. Males are 48% of this electorate. We have to take it seriously, and I think we can do a little bit better, but there's no doubt that we're not hitting the numbers we need to among males.
James, I just want to ask you about the money in all of this, too, because the latest FEC filings show the Democrats have a huge fundraising advantage, especially over the last 3 months, over the Republicans and former President Trump. So in these last 20 days, what kind of a difference can that money make, and where should it go?
Well, first of all, if it didn't make any difference, everybody's trying to raise as much as they can. So somebody thinks that it matters. But if you look beyond the money, you look at volunteers. I mean, if they're flooded with volunteers, Trump has no ground game. So we've never known what it means to have a robust GOTV effort, a robust voter contact effort. And every place I've talked, the Democrats are really, really putting this together, and he's not putting anything together. I think he's trying to outsource some of it, but we do have a fundraising advantage. We have an enthusiasm advantage. We have a volunteer advantage. I think we have a visibility advantage, and you just got to keep pressing your advantages as you get closer and closer to Election Day. And hopefully these tide, what I tell people, polling is 48-48. That's just the way it is. And hopefully as we get closer to election, it'll break her away. That's the hope. I think it can happen.
It's always great to speak with you, always great to hear your insights and your thoughts. That is longtime Democratic strategist James Carville joining us tonight. James, thank you.
Thank you very much. You bet.
In today's other news, Israel resumed punishing airstrikes on Beirut's southern suburbs and across central and southern Lebanon. More than 130 strikes targeted what Israel says were Hezbollah operatives and locations. Israel's military also said more than 90 Hezbollah rockets were fired into northern Israel today. Special correspondent Leila Mulana Allen reports.
Slim hopes for a ceasefire dashed. Yesterday, Lebanon's caretaker prime minister said he'd had guarantees from the United States that the bombing of Beirut would cease. Today's Skyline told a different story. After a few days of relief, the bombardment of the capital's southern suburbs resumed, heavier than ever.
There's been a huge increase in the intensity and frequency of the airstrikes here, and now much of these southern suburbs are devastated. It's one of the most heavily populated areas around Beirut, and that means that tens of thousands of people have been removed from their homes.
In the southern city of Nabatea, a meeting of the mayor and his municipal workers became this region's next graveyard. The target of the Israeli strike here was the city's crisis management hub, meeting to organize and distribute aid to displaced families. Mayor Ahmed Khalil and his team were all killed. The death toll is 16 and rising. More than 50 were injured. As volunteer first responders tried to save their colleagues, they sent out desperate voice messages.
The mayor's inside. Everyone's inside. No one could survive this. They're all dead.
When the IDF told Nabatea's residents to leave earlier this month, Ahmed and his team refused. They felt they had to stay to help the thousands of Lebanese still stuck and increasingly cut off by the bombardment in towns and villages across the governorate. Dania is one of a group of mothers in Beirut, raising funds to help provide essentials to the more than 1.2 million Lebanese made homeless by this war. She was coordinating with Ahmed's team.
They specifically said they wanted milk and baby diapers. 2 hours later, we got the news that there was a raid on the municipality that was organizing all the relief efforts. And we learned that the person that we were on the phone with was killed.
Many here from across Lebanon's political and religious spectrum increasingly view this as a war waged against them, not just by Israel, but by its main backer, the United States, including some of its own citizens.
They had every opportunity to have stopped this war, and they refused. They continue to send weapons to Israel with taxes I'm paying for because I am an American citizen. I mean, the carte blanche that the Biden administration is giving the Israelis, what it means is death. What it means is killing. What it means is destruction. It means destroying villages, destroying homes, destroying our trust in the world. We've lost trust in the world.
And every day, as the world watches, more death and destruction unfolds here. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Leila Mulana Allen in Beirut.
Also today, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky laid out his so-called victory plan to his country's parliament. The 5-part plan includes a formal invitation to join NATO and permission to use Western-supplied weapons to strike deep into Russian territory, among other measures. Both steps have met with resistance by Ukraine's allies so far, but speaking to lawmakers, Zelensky insisted these measures are needed.
We
Ukrainians, together with our partners, must change the circumstances so that the war ends regardless of what Putin wants. We must all change the circumstances so that Russia is forced to peace.
Russian officials brushed off the plan, calling it, quote, a set of incoherent slogans. And Western leaders don't fully support Zelensky's plan either, with the head of NATO, Mark Rutte, stopping short of an endorsement.
I will not comment on every element in the plan, but it is of course a strong signal from Zelensky and his team that they designed this plan, that they are now taking it forward. That doesn't mean that I here can say I support the whole plan.
Zelensky spoke this afternoon to President Biden, who has also declined to publicly support the victory plan. But the White House did announce a new $425 million security package for Ukraine today. Nebraska's High Court ruled today that felons who have completed their sentences can register to vote. The state legislature had passed a law that restored voting rights for felons earlier this year, but Republican Secretary of State Bob Evnen deemed it unconstitutional. Today's ruling says he did not have authority to do that. The decision could have national implications, given that mostly red Nebraska splits its electoral college votes by congressional district. Many who can now register to vote live in the Omaha area. Their ballots could impact both an electoral college vote and a closely contested House race there. A judge in Nevada has sentenced a former Las Vegas area politician to 28 years in prison for the murder of investigative journalist Jeff German of the Las Vegas Review-Journal. A jury found Robert Tellis guilty of killing German in August after he wrote articles critical of Tellis's conduct in office. The judge added 8 years to the minimum 20-year sentence set by the jury for Tellis, citing his use of a deadly weapon in the crime. Tellis had denied killing German. His attorney says he plans to appeal the conviction. In Nigeria, more than 440 people, including children, are confirmed dead after a gasoline tanker crashed on a highway and burst into flames. Dozens more were injured. It happened in the country's northern Jigawa state. Nigeria is the most populous country in Africa, but it lacks an efficient railway system to transport cargo like petrol. Cell phone video captured the fiery scene overnight. By morning, the tank's wreckage was still upturned on the road. Witnesses say that many victims were trying to salvage the spilled fuel with cups and buckets when the truck exploded into flames.
When you travel around Nigeria, what you see is hunger. And when people get hunger, they get hungry, they get desperate. When that person sees an opportunity to make money from scooping fuel, they will take that chance. I think we need to do better as a community. We need to do better as a nation. People cannot just continue to live a life of hunger.
Deadly tanker accidents are common in Nigeria, where vehicles often fail to meet international standards on preventing fuel spillage. 48 people were killed in a similar crash last month. Italy has made it illegal for people to go abroad to have children through surrogacy. The country's Senate passed that measure today after a 7-hour debate. It expands on a ban on the practice that's been in place in Italy since 2004. The government's conservative majority says it is seeking to protect women's dignity. Critics say it's meant to target same-sex couples. Italians who seek surrogacy in places like the U.S. or Canada can face up to 2 years in jail and more than $1 million in fines. On Wall Street today, stocks ended higher after some strong earnings from corporate America. The Dow Jones Industrial Average added more than 300 points to close back above the 43,000-point level. The Nasdaq rose about 50 points on the day, and the S&P 500 also ended in positive territory. And family members, pop stars, and dignitaries of the Democratic Party paid tribute today to Ethel Kennedy, the late widow of Robert F. Kennedy, at a funeral service in Washington, D.C. Former Presidents Bill Clinton and Barack Obama attended. Current President Joe Biden delivered the eulogy.
Ethel was a hero in her own right, full of character, full of integrity and empathy, genuine empathy.
Ethel Kennedy carried on her late husband's work following his assassination in 1968. She also raised their 11 children. Ethel Kennedy died last week at the age of 96. Still to come on the News Hour, swing voters in Nevada explain their views on this year's election. The efforts to find dozens of North Carolina residents still missing weeks after Hurricane Helene. And a Russian metal sculptor who opposes the war in Ukraine makes a new life in Oregon.
This is the PBS NewsHour from the David M. Rubenstein Studio at WETA in Washington, and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
As former President Donald Trump's election interference case continues to make its way through a D.C. federal court, some legal analysts are questioning the Justice Department's handling of the case. After a federal judge this month unsealed a legal brief from special counsel Jack Smith containing new evidence in the case, a debate has focused on why the DOJ allowed the collection of evidence to be released so close to Election Day, with some arguing it could influence the presidential race. One of those scholars is Jack Goldsmith, whose recent essay in the New York Times is titled, "Jack Smith Owes Us an Explanation." Goldsmith is a former assistant attorney general in the George W. Bush administration and now a professor at Harvard Law. We spoke with him yesterday. Jack Goldsmith, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
When you say Jack Smith owes us an explanation, you take particular issue with the timing of his brief. What do you say to those who argue that the special counsel was simply complying with the rules that Judge Chutkan, the judge in this case, laid out?
Well, the Justice Department has a set of norms, one of which is the so-called 60-day rule that says you don't take an action or make a disclosure that close to the election that could impact the election. And the judge asked the special counsel whether he had any objection to having these disclosures close to the election. He said he had no objection at all, so he seemed to think that there was no prohibition on doing so. And he had no objection to her timing and releasing it before the election.
It's my understanding that the special counsel has said on the record that the Justice Department's internal so-called 60-day rule does not apply to cases that have already been charged or that are being litigated, to which you would say what?
I would say that I don't think he's made that clear at all. I think you're referring to a confused colloquy in the Miami Documents case. There was a very important Inspector General report in 2018 that talked about the 60-day rule. Its dominant understanding, as conveyed in that report, was that the rule prohibits disclosures or actions close to the election that impact the election. There were some people that believed what you just said, but the Inspector General said in 2018 that this rule needs clarity, and the Justice Department never gave clarity, and they haven't explained why this disclosure was consistent with these norms.
Is there a rule or a policy or an expectation that prosecutors, conversely, would sit and wait for the outcome of an election that could determine whether or not this case could even move forward?
This case is completely unprecedented, so I don't know what the proper expectation is with regard to that question. The point I've raised is that there is this rule. It was a big issue in 2016, as you recall. It was an issue in 2020 about not having disclosures that impact an election. And the only thing I'm asking for is for the department to explain clearly why it thinks that what it did is consistent with that norm. It's very important that the department has these norms so that to ensure that not only that they in fact don't act politically, but they appear not to act politically. And this is an unprecedented prosecution of a former president by an administration that is headed by the president and the vice president who were and are running against this president in this election. And in this context, more than any other context in the department's history, because this is the most sensitive investigation in its history, it needs to be really clear and explicit about why it's complying with these norms, and it just hasn't been.
There are also those who take issue with the Supreme Court's role in all of this, that the court, with its conservative majority, refused Jack Smith's request to expedite consideration of Donald Trump's claim of presidential immunity, and that the ultimate ruling on immunity has further delayed consideration.
It's true that the ruling on immunity further delayed consideration. That's absolutely true, but that's irrelevant to Smith's duty to comply with the norms about not impacting or appearing to impact an election. So what the court did, and we can debate that if you like, but what the court did delay the trial which Smith was pushing to try to have before the election, which also raised questions under department norms. There's no doubt that what the court did delayed the trial, but that's not relevant to Smith's duties in the run-up to the election.
Why hasn't the DOJ, in your view, cleared up some of these perceived questions about this 60-day rule?
It's a real mystery to me. This was, again, the Inspector General, in a widely read report in 2018, explained that this rule was ambiguous and uncertain and needed to be clarified. He asked for clarification. It's been 6 years now, and the department hasn't clarified. And I don't know why. It's exactly what I think the department should be doing. They should have clarified it, in my opinion, before this most sensitive of prosecutions. And they should have explained what the rules were up front before they started applying them in secret to tell us. And let me be clear, I really do believe that the department believes it's complying with all relevant norms. It's stated so. Attorney General Garland has stated so. And I believe that they believe that. All I'm asking for is that they explain it to the public so that it doesn't appear like they're acting or allowing disclosures that could impact the election.
Does this raise questions for you about the special counsel's work or approach moving forward?
This is the case. This is the only case where this is relevant before the election. I don't believe that there's anything going on right now in the documents case that I'm aware of that implicates this concern.
Jack Goldsmith, thanks so much for joining us and sharing your insights. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
In a deeply divided electorate, one group of voters is increasingly coveted by both sides: swing voters. In the swing state of Nevada, Judy Woodruff recently listened to two groups of voters who chose Donald Trump in 2016 and Joe Biden in 2020 as they discussed their thoughts on the state of the race and the country. It's part of her ongoing series, America at a Crossroads.
Las Vegas, the crown jewel of the critical swing state of Nevada, the most important Democratic stronghold in a hotly contested purple state. Vegas is a hub for tourism, entertainment, and spectacle. But behind the flashing lights of the Strip, Democrats and Republicans are scrambling to shore up support for their respective candidates. And even in a state where Democrats narrowly won in 2016 and 2020, one name looms above the rest.
I thought Trump, as a businessman, would be able to do something that professional politicians couldn't do.
I like the fact that he's a businessman. I figured that could bring fresh ideas to the table for the economy. And he was not a politician, which I thought would be refreshing.
Everyone in these two focus groups voted for Donald Trump in 2016.
Now, was I duped? Yeah, I was. And then the election was passed. Trump did not ever shut up, because I thought, well, maybe if he gets in, he'll shut up. He didn't.
I was definitely gung-ho Trump. But then, after we went through that time period, you know, it started kind of going off the rails a little bit.
But in 2020, they soured on President Trump and checked the box for Joe Biden.
I'm sure they both want the best for the country, and I'm for that, but Trump, I just feel, would just say or do something wrong and just cause more chaos.
I thought that for all of the positives he may have created in his 4 years, his divisiveness was ridiculous. You know, he could not leave the good things alone. He had to follow it up with something that made you shake your head and go, really?
Republican strategist and host of the Focus Group podcast, Sarah Longwell.
A lot of times elections are decided by the way that these kind of independent swing voters break at the very end. And so how they break in 2024 is going to matter a great deal in determining who wins this election.
Longwell is the publisher of The Bulwark, a center-right media outlet opposed to Donald Trump. She runs focus groups like these across the country, using a nonpartisan approach to better understand all voters' thinking. From the control room of Vegas PBS, I watched as she engaged with these 14 Nevadans on a range of issues.
Is it possible to know what percentage, roughly, of the electorate this group represents, the Trump to Biden voters?
People who went from Trump to Biden, that is much closer to a 6 or 7% swing, but they are determinative when it comes to who wins elections in these critical swing states.
Their reactions to President Biden's performance so far were mixed.
How many people would give Joe Biden an A during his time as president? How many would give him a B? Barbara's a B. How many would give him a C? We've got 4 C's. How many would give him a D? Are you an F, Pierre?
He's an F.
Okay.
We are at a high rate right now of food insecurity. People don't know where they're going to eat. So as long as that's the case, then the economy is not moving forward for the masses of this country.
Things are too expensive nowadays. You know, the cost of living is definitely going up, and we definitely need to, you know, find a president or to get a president that will able to lead this country in the right way.
For some of these voters, Vice President Harris' rise to the top of the ticket was cause for enthusiasm.
How many of you were glad to see Vice President Kamala Harris take over for Joe Biden? Yeah, raise your hand if you were glad.
I was not for her, and then all of a sudden when it went in, I was so surprised. I felt like I had a breath of fresh air. It was shocking to me, but I think it was like, oh my gosh, somebody else. And it just infused so much energy, and I was like, oh, I like this.
I just want something new. I want some forward thinking. I don't want to be living back like being told what to do. Women can't do this. But like if a guy can get pregnant, there'd probably be abortion clinics on every corner, you know? And it's just sad that that's the way it seems. Like Trump just wants that power, and his followers are just like, yeah. And
Others felt they still needed to know more about her.
I'm very uncertain about her. There's just a feeling, and I'm going to do lots more research before I do vote. There are rumors and things that I need to research more. Still leaning towards him a little bit more.
Rumors about her, like what kind of rumors?
Sleeping her way to the top. Anybody can say that about a woman. I'm tired of hearing that. You know, hopefully it's not true.
Well, what about the men that slept their way to the top? There's a lot of them.
There are. Yep.
Serious. We should give them both.
No, I'm
and Trump's done a lot of that. So hey, there you go.
He said how many wives? But yeah, no, I'm tired of hearing it about women. You know, like it's just she went to school. She has.
So why bring it up now?
These are rumors that I need to research.
Okay.
That's what I said.
But she was elected to all of her positions. So there is no sleeping her way to the top with that.
We heard skepticism about Vice President Harris' record on the economy, despite low unemployment, falling inflation, and record numbers in the markets.
I just don't see a real plan that we're going to have a better economy in 4 years.
What about you?
I think it's just going to be 4 more years of Bidenomics and what we've just gone through with President Biden. And that's going to be a disaster for the United States.
But there were also concerns about how former President Trump would use his power if reelected.
I think he's running for himself to keep himself out of jail. He's a convicted felon. I don't trust him. I don't believe he respects the Constitution. And he will come in and he will change as much as he can. And I worry will become a dictatorship in the United States.
She snagged that dictatorship word from me right before I was going to use it. And, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if he tries to pass a thing where he can stay president for the rest of his life. You know? So,
does the fact that Donald Trump didn't engage in the peaceful transfer of power, does that bother you?
It bothered me, but at the same time, I've watched Trump ever since he was in New York in the 80s. I don't expect him to do the right thing in most circumstances, because he never has before. But the rhetoric and what have you between the two parties, it was there before Trump showed up. He just brought it to light to the American public that didn't know what was going on.
I asked Longwell why she thought some of these voters were planning on voting for Trump despite their concerns.
People have a lot of reasons when it comes to Donald Trump. Like, they have very firm opinions on him. And so the question really is, for a lot of these swing voters, no matter how much they dislike Donald Trump, does their belief that Donald Trump is better for the economy or immigration, does that move them back to him? Or have they decided that they still dislike Donald Trump and are willing to vote for a Democrat? Or are they actually being persuaded that Kamala Harris is the right person at this moment?
There was one thing most everyone agreed on.
How many of you think our politics has gotten worse over the last 10 years? Why do you think it's gotten worse?
There's more political violence in our own country. I mean, look at the insurrection. It's unprecedented, terrible. And people don't respect each other's differences anymore. You can't have a civil conversation if you disagree with a lot of people. You're just like seen as the enemy, both sides.
There's more money in this country now than there's ever been. And each party is trying to get, you know, some of that money. And you know, they're trying to grab at it with both hands and their toes.
Do you think that there's something really wrong with how people in the country are viewing politics right now?
I think everyone has their right to their own opinion, and it shouldn't cause violence or any like disdain between people, because it's really not that important. I mean, it is important, but like, aren't our relationships with each other more important, like our everyday life?
Still, many said they feel political divisions in their own families.
Well, my sister and my parents don't speak, and they haven't for like 3 years now. And what sparked it was politics.
On the question of which candidate would do more to bring the country together, the consensus among these swing voters was clear.
Do you think the country will become more divided under Trump or less divided under Trump? How many of you think it will become more divided under Trump? How many of you think it will become less divided under Trump? Less divided? How many of you think Trump will bring us back together and heal our divides?
I just think Trump will make the economy better, but he won't bring us back together. I don't think that at all.
Even people who were saying that they were going to vote for Donald Trump do not think that he is going to do anything to heal the divisions in the country. And I think that this is something that is very common among this type of swing voter, which is if they can get there on Donald Trump, if they're willing to go back and vote for him again, it is almost always in spite of his personality, in spite of his rhetoric, in spite of the fact that they don't necessarily think he's good for the country in a number of ways, but they tend to, on a couple of key issues, believe that Donald Trump would be better than more or less any Democrat.
For this still undecided voter, a decision remained just out of reach.
I'm not Republican, Democrat. I just want what's best.
Who will you vote for?
I can't commit. There's so many things we haven't even gotten into. There's so many good things on one side and so many good things on the other side and so many bad on each.
Pollster Sarah Longwell told us these swing voters are typically more accepting of people who disagree with them than are diehard Republicans and Democrats. But they are clearly as worried as anyone about the country's divisions. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Judy Woodruff in Las Vegas, Nevada.
It has been nearly 3 weeks since Hurricane Helene began its devastating march across the southeast, killing at least 230 people in 6 states. Nowhere has the storm's impact been more destructive than in western North Carolina, where entire communities were swept away, thousands remain without power, and search crews continue to hunt for at least 80 people who are still unaccounted for. To help us understand the complexity of that search and the challenges those teams are facing, we're joined now by Ryan Cole. He's the Emergency Services Assistant Director for Buncombe County, home to Asheville, and has been on the ground working on this recovery. Thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for having us.
How is the recovery process progressing, especially this process of trying to find the people who are still unaccounted for?
So, Jeff, we have worked through several lists of people where they have been unaccounted for, and we're still working to try to identify those people that are still missing or unaccounted for. And as we do that, then we are doing targeted searches in specific areas where the high probability that we might be able to locate any of the victims. Whenever we go out, those targeted searches include removing large amounts of debris and working through hazardous materials and other items to be able to try to work through those piles to get to victims that might be in those areas.
Paint a picture for us of the challenges facing your team. How destructive was Helene to Asheville and Buncombe County?
So we had some significant destructions down the watersheds through the river valleys. From flooding, we had significant damage there throughout the watersheds as it took out the sides of the hills. When you're looking in flat lands and you have flooding, the water rises up and it just inundates an area with slow moving water or no moving water. In the mountains, in the watersheds, as that water comes up and we have significant rainfall, then that goes down through the mountain valleys, collecting all the water as it goes. creating significant turbulence and destroying things in its path, taking out trees, taking out cars, buildings, anything in its path. However, on top of the flooding, we also had significant landslides that occurred in the ridges as well. Due to the rains and the unstable ground that we had from 9 inches of rain prior to the storm even arriving, the ground was saturated with water, and as more of the rain come in, it caused some of that land to dislodge and start down the hill. Once it starts down the hill, it takes everything in its path, homes, cars, forest, everything through that until it comes to a stopping point.
The governor of North Carolina, Roy Cooper, yesterday spoke of what he called a persistent and dangerous flow of misinformation concerning FEMA and the recovery effort. How has that affected the work that you and your teams are doing?
We have had misinformation that has been out, and anytime that we have misinformation that occurs, that slows our progress to be able to help out the citizens in most need. FEMA has been on the ground and in partnership with us, along with the state of North Carolina, and many resources throughout the state and throughout the United States to assist us in the process of getting to recovery.
Helene was followed directly by Milton, and much of the country's focus shifted to Florida. What does Western North Carolina need right now to get back on its feet?
The first and foremost, the greatest thing that we need is to remain in the thoughts and prayers of the people across the United States. That's the greatest thing that we can use right now. But the biggest thing that we are facing is the infrastructure that we have lost. The power companies have done a significant job in Western North Carolina in restoring the power. Responders have done a significant job throughout the communities in supporting each individual community and taking care of them. We've had volunteers that have supported through donations and getting things out to the community to support those people. But now we have the infrastructure issues with roadways that are gone. Many roadways are built along sides of the riverbanks, and those riverbanks, as they flooded, they took out those roadways, and it's going to take quite a while to build that up. I know a lot of people are looking, they want to do something, they want to give. So the one thing that we ask is, if you're looking to give, look for those monetary donations that you can do to some of our partnering organizations such as United Way, but continue to give us your thoughts and prayers in this community and the support that you have given us so far.
Ryan Cole, thanks for your time this evening, sir. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
The ongoing war in Ukraine has impacted tens of millions of people, including Russians who have Ukrainian relatives. Special correspondent Kat Wise recently spent a day with a Russian artist whose life took a dramatic turn after the war broke out in 2022. Her report is part of our Arts and Culture series, Canvas.
The walk to work in downtown Bend, Oregon is fairly short these days for artist Anton Yakushev, but it's a long way from home. Yakushev, who is 39, was born and raised in a city on the outskirts of Moscow called Kolomna. Today, he's an internationally recognized metal sculptor who has spent a lot of time over the past 20 years working with forges and fire. His craft requires patience and speed. After the metal is hot enough, he has less than a minute to shape it.
I studied to become an artist. After I tried working with metal, I realized this is the material I would use my entire life.
His intricate works, which can be found, among other places, on the streets of Russia and in a Memphis museum, may look like they were cast from molds, but they are all hand-forged. Seamless welds and carefully placed rivets hold together the individual pieces of each sculpture.
I simply consider myself first an artist, and only then a blacksmith. I don't want to prove anything, to explain anything with my art. First and foremost, this is my world, and then people connect to it and understand something, find something of their own in it, draw their own things. My art allows people to fantasize.
This is my favorite hammers. This is for forge very huge metal.
Yakushev's distinctive approach to metal art has been sought after, taking him from Russia to international museums, art schools, and professional workshops where he's been invited to teach, and artistic competitions where he's received recognitions and awards. But for the last 2.5 years, Bend and this workshop have been his life and his refuge. Yakushev and his wife Katya, who is also Russian, arrived in the U.S. in mid-February 2022 to teach at blacksmithing events.
We were planning to spend in the States about 3 months, and then Russia invaded Ukraine at the end of February, and we realized that we're not able to go back to Russia.
Going back, they say, would have put Yakushev, who spent a lot of time with family in Ukraine when he was younger and opposes the Russian government, at risk of jail or worse.
Когда началась война,
when the war broke out, it cut through everything and completely broke me because I spent half my life in Ukraine. My mother's Ukrainian. It was already an extreme point with Crimea and, of course, eventually, the war.
After Russia seized Crimea from Ukraine a decade ago, Yakushev joined protests and refused to participate in a government-backed art project celebrating the annexation. How were you impacted as an artist by your political views, your opposition to the government?
да, меня перекрывали везде, то есть меня не...
I was cut off everywhere. I wasn't accepted into competitions. I wasn't accepted to the Union of Artists of Russia. There was a block on me everywhere.
His opposition has also come through in his art, including a series of haunting soldier sculptures he began making in 2012 with his brother, who is also a metal artist, called The Leaves Cover the War. The works were created with old metal they found in World War II-era battlefields in Russia.
This was the main idea of our works, to show all the horrors of the war, and that it is the most horrible thing that can happen to someone, and in fact, the world.
The turmoil in their own lives following the outbreak of the war is fading day by day as the couple have adjusted to their new life in Bend, where a community of fellow artists and blacksmiths have been offering support. Once an essential craft, today they're estimated to be only 2,500 professional blacksmiths in the U.S. And one of them is Joe Elliott.
He's going to be influencing the world of metalworking for a very long time to come.
Elliott, who's been a blacksmith in the Bend area for the past 40 years, first met Yakushev in 2019 at a workshop.
We made a praying mantis, and I remember him rolling out the drawing, and we taped it to the board, and it was, the drawing itself was just drop dead gorgeous. Yes? Mm-hmm.
Now they see each other just about every day. Elliott owns the forge business where Yakushev has been working, and they often collaborate. Earlier this year, Elliott and Yakushev worked with several other local artists on a life-size eagle, now on permanent display at the High Desert Museum in Bend.
Having him in the shop puts, a new wind in my sails. But Anton has brought to me this whole other way of looking at metal, coming up with a substantial piece by lots of little pieces. And I'm fascinated by it.
Yakushev has also been learning from Elliott, who has encouraged him to explore new art forms like jewelry. Some of those pieces and others are now for sale at the workshop, online, and will be shown at upcoming art shows by the couple, who are now focused on their future. Their application for permanent asylum in the U.S. was recently approved. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Kat Wise in Bend, Oregon.
Before we go, a news update that shocked fans across the music world. Liam Payne, a former singer for the acclaimed boy band One Direction, fell to his death from the third-floor balcony of a hotel in Argentina's capital, Buenos Aires. Argentine police and medics on scene say Payne succumbed to extremely serious injuries. Liam Payne was 31 years old. And that's the NewsHour for tonight. I'm Jeff Bennett.
And I'm Amna Nawaz. On behalf of the entire NewsHour team, thank you for joining us.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by
On an American Cruise Line's journey along the Columbia and Snake Rivers, travelers retrace the route forged by Lewis and Clark more than 200 years ago. American Cruise Line's fleet of modern riverboats travel through American landscapes to historic landmarks, where you can experience local customs and cuisine. American Cruise Lines, proud sponsor of PBS NewsHour.
the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions, and friends of the NewsHour, including Jim and Nancy Bildner and the Robert and Virginia Schiller Foundation. The Ford Foundation, working with visionaries on the front lines of social change worldwide. Funding for America at a Crossroads was provided by and with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.